We're going to go ahead and get the item started then. Hopefully it'll be on. All right, item 7.2, consideration of emergency proclamation declaring a shelter crisis in the county of Lake. And this is presented by Michael Green and also Bruno Sabatier. So Mike, Supervisor Green, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Back in January of this year, we did this board did approve an emergency declaration for a shelter crisis, and this was necessary, of course, to cover the operation out at the former juvenile hall in North Lakeport. In going over the original proclamation, which talked about things like a warming shelter and inclement weather and the need for sheltering, and in also working with Continuum of Care and Behavioral Health on fleshing out what the next iteration of the shelter will be. We wanted to take another look at the shelter crisis proclamation, not make it dependent on, heat or cold or some type of climatic condition that would justify the state of emergency. The emergency is basically the people are without housing and adequate shelter, which creates not just terrible outcomes potentially for them, but also creates negative impacts on the public health, safety, and welfare of the surrounding community. So what's before you today is basically a 2.0 version of the shelter crisis resolution. We did add some language after consulting with the county council, citing to the health and safety code and the government code sections that are most relevant to declaring this crisis, and in specific government code section 8698 and 8698.2 really give local governments some ability to meaningfully declare a shelter crisis and to have some flexibilities if needed in operating an emergency shelter. So this revised proclamation declaring a shelter crisis is what is before the board today. And can I do that with 3 votes?
I think we have Supervisor Sabatier getting ready to come on.
All right. And that was a technical question I failed to ask before placing this item, so.
Yeah, and just to state it, I think I don't have the government code, but it gives opportunities for supervisors who are traveling on official county business, which they are at the CSAC conference, to join remotely and participate in the meetings. I think that can be done twice a year and so. And if anyone has that government code, they could state that for me, but I don't have that.
That's within the Brown Act, was amended by Assembly Bill 2449.
Thank you very much.
Is it coming?
There he goes. Good morning, Supervisor Sabatier.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me join.
Okay, Supervisor Green just kind of went over, did the introduction. We're still in the early stages here, so he kind of really did a good job of detailing what we were attempting to do today, what was presented. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask you if you have any comments at this point.
I wanted to listen in to see what was going to be said. So at this moment in time, I'll just keep listening. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I think the last question, obviously, is this a 4/5 vote for this resolution?
From what I gather, taking it up as an extra item, I believe, would require a 4/5, but it's not an extra item.
No.
So in that case, it defaults, I believe, to the 3/5, just like any other proclamations. But I will look into, I am currently looking into that, if correction needs to be made.
Okay.
Well, out of an abundance of caution, we have 4 votes, so it may be a moot point.
Just wanted that clarification, though, just for anybody's knowledge. All right. Well, with that, there are no comments at the board. We appreciate this item being brought. We're going to go ahead and open this up to public comment. I do know we have folks that I think would like to comment on this item, but we'll see. Go ahead and open it up to public comment for anyone in the chambers at this point. If you want to make a comment, you got to come up to the microphone. And it looks like we don't have any. All right. Anyone online? Okay, we will bring this back then. Any more discussion at the board level?
If there's nothing further, Honorable Chair, I move that we approve the proclamation declaring a shelter crisis in the County of Lake.
Is there a second?
And I will second. I will second.
Seconded by Sabatier. So there's a motion and a second. Now, do we need to do a roll call vote because we have one online?
Probably.
I would
think so.
recommend it. I would recommend it.
Supervisor Sabatier.
Actually, point of
Aye.
order. I think we are well within our rights, but should we have Supervisor Sabatier declare his good cause for appearing this before the vote?
That would be, yeah, it would be recommended under the Assembly Bill 2449, just to put it on the record as far as the remote appearance under that Assembly.
Yeah,
Bill, yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Or just
Brief
cause.
statement by Supervisor Sabatier explaining he is attending official business out of county and is attending this vote in the middle of that official function.
Go ahead.
That's it. That ditto, exactly what was just said. I'm over at the CSAC conference in Alameda County and am unable to attend at the board meeting, but I am here online to be able to vote on these items.
Okay, thank you. We'll continue with the roll call vote.
Supervisor Sabatier.
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall.
Yes.
Supervisor Green.
Aye.
And Supervisor Simon.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, motion passes. Thank you, Bruno.
And are you guys moving on to the next item?
Yes,
Is that the
that is 7.3, consideration of agreement between County of Lake, the Lake County Behavioral Health Services Department
Perfect.
at the lead administrative entity, as the lead administrative entity for the Lake County Continuum of Care Redwood Community Services, Inc., in the amount of $2,417,489.64 for fiscal years 23 through 26. Okay, go ahead, Elise.
Thank you, board. Oh, is this, okay. So as it states, yes, this is a new shelter contract. Presently, the shelter is operated on an interim basis by Blue Horizons, and there's a long history of who has operated this shelter. And the biggest difference in this shelter contract is that it's a transition from overnight to 24/7. And I would like to highlight a few things about it that I think are great improvements. So as you will see in the funding breakdown, the funding for this contract through the COC is front-loaded and will attenuate over time as Redwood Community Services rolls out the enhanced care management benefit and also the medical respite benefit, which will ultimately be the long-term sustainability for the shelter. So they will have co-located services there, again, which will bill through Medi-Cal and sustain the shelter. And they have a history of doing that type of programming in Mendocino County. So I'm happy to say that we're not a pilot in that. And I think that's the biggest things that I wanted to highlight. Again, 24/7 operations and then sustainability of funding, and happy to answer any questions from your board.
Okay, Supervisor Sabatier, do you have a question?
More of a comment. There is also some case management that is involved in this contract in comparison to the previous contract. And I think that is a huge adjustment to ensure that we are moving people along and not just keeping them in a shelter, whether that's through housing navigation or to other services that they require. Having that case management is going to be crucial to providing exactly what those individuals need. And I do want to add one more thing. I know I got a question about this over the weekend. Yes, the chair of the COC, as well as another member of the COC Executive Committee, is from Redwood Community Services. At no point did any of those individuals take part in the creation of the RFP process, the selection of the proposals that we received in order to get to the point that we are here today. Either they avoided being in the meetings or recused themselves from the items specific related to this.
Okay, thank you very much. Any question, Supervisor Crandall?
Yes, I don't know if you mentioned this, but is this similar? Is this going to be a similar model to the Building Bridges program that Mendocino is? Well, not Mendocino, but RCS does in Mendocino County.
If I may, I'd love to invite Sage Wolf, who is she's the owner of it. Well, she's the owner of the RFP, I would say, or had a long. So this is Sage Wolf, and she is with Redwood Community Services, and she is the Director of Community Integration.
Integrated Health.
Integrated Health, thank you.
I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for having me here today. So you asked if it's similar to the Building Bridges project in Ukiah, and yes, that is a shelter project we've been operating. Well, we've been operating it. It's kind of complicated history-wise. It's had a lot of different evolutions because, doing shelter, you learn a lot and you make adjustments. But really, since 2015, we've been doing emergency shelter. In 2019, in November 2019, we transitioned that shelter from being an overnight winter shelter to being a 24-hour facility, and we've been operating it as a 24-hour facility since November of 2019. There's some differences between the Building Bridges Homeless Resource Center and this facility in Lakeport, mainly in that the facility in Ukiah is located in the city proper, so it's really centrally located. We are open to the public at that location during the day, so people who aren't staying at the shelter can come and access services and resources. So we're both an emergency shelter and a drop-in center. The location in Lakeport isn't very well placed to be that kind of public drop-in center. It's just, it's not as easily accessible. And then the difference in Ukiah also is that our Ukiah shelter is a congregate facility. So we have a dorm where so you have 55 beds and they're all in a space together in a dorm. By dorm, I don't mean like what you think of as college where you have like a room with 2 people. It's a big room with 55 beds. Whereas the shelter in Lakeport is designed to have the separate private rooms for folks. So there's some inherent differences that'll come with those things. But as far as the foundational model of emergency shelter, it will be very similar. We're using our policies that we've had established for our Ukiah shelter as the foundation for what we're doing here.
Thank you for that. I've heard great things about it. There was someone in my town hall last night in Central Region in Lucerne, and they had some very good comments about that. I had mentioned how RCS would be taking over in December, and this was a comment made from the public. Also, I really appreciate the monthly reporting in the document as well. So I think this is a good thing, and I appreciate everything that I've looked at when it comes to this item. Thank you.
All right. Supervisor Green?
Yeah, I want to thank Sage. I actually visited the shelter in Ukiah yesterday. I wasted about 2 hours of your time asking any number of questions, and I appreciate the time. And I feel good about that operation, but also some challenges there too. Congregate living, that's kind of hard. And I just want to highlight that because last week I did express some concerns about the contract before us today. And I'm going to restate those concerns, not that I am going to suggest holding up this contract in any way, because as was communicated to me very effectively by any number of people, this contract's going to go today. But based on our existing shelter operations, Blue Horizons, Sunrise before that, Elijah House before that, this is the most difficult type of. You can't do this without incurring daily risk and substantial risk. And if I fault this contract, it's by not really getting granular enough about who's on first, who's responsible for the way it's termed in this contract, unusual occurrences. And there have been unusual occurrences at the shelter. There will be unusual occurrences once Redwood takes over this shelter and moves forward. So I want to express confidence that the policies and procedures Redwood is going to bring to this and the expertise they bring from their Ukiah operation is going to be really light years ahead of where we are. And so I express some hope for that, but I also want to express for future contracts and other shelters and stuff like that, that are really drilling down into the immense liability that can be carried into these facilities and making sure we parse correctly what the county's responsibilities are and what the contractor's responsibilities are. Because we found in our current operation, on the one hand, it's supposed to be all on the independent contractor, but the shortcomings of the juvenile hall facility have fallen primarily to the county. So with the county, we have to we have to do our own due diligence on the county side to make sure we're presenting you with a safe facility. And the same thing, the contractor has a responsibility to make sure these unusual occurrences within that facility are adequately handled and reported. So I don't personally think today's contract is adequate to all those questions, but I'm not going to oppose it on that basis today. I'm just going to invite future iterations to get a little more granular. And that was the comment.
All right. Thank you.
I-
Could I just have you state your name too? I know
yeah.
Elise did it, but
Sage Wolf, Director of Integrated Health for Redwood Community Services. And I guess I'll just take an opportunity, if that's okay, to thank the county and behavioral health and the Lake County COC for the opportunity to do shelter. As Supervisor Green said, it is one of the hardest and highest, it is a high risk operation. The folks that we will be targeting in emergency shelter are some of our most vulnerable community members that are elders and living with disabilities and have been homeless for a long time and are living with a lot of challenges. And we are experienced in running that kind of shelter and working with this population and being able to we're aware of the kind of risks that are involved. Not that we can predict every single thing that might happen and we can't have a plan in place for every single type of thing that might happen. I don't think any of us can predict the future like that. But what I can say is that we are really adept and responsive and in being able to quickly identify potential risks, and then when risks happen, be able to respond as quickly as possible to what's happening. And we have a lot of experience and expertise in our agency around mitigating the kind of risks that you're concerned around. So I think one of the key pieces that I've been seeing is the collaboration that's already in place to support the shelter, and that's going to be really key to continue, is that collaborative, because none of us can address homelessness by ourselves. We need to do it as a community. And so I appreciate the stakeholder meetings that I've been invited to, and look forward to continuing that so that we can do the best job possible here. So
thank you. Supervisor Sabatier, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a quick question, and I apologize for not looking at this detail. I know in the original contract we reviewed at the COC, it said that RCS would initiate the services at the shelter on December 15th. Was that changed to potentially December 1st on the contract?
Well, the contract start date is October 1st, and so
I just know that there was a specific date of when they would take over on the shelter within the document, and it said December 15th.
That will have to be changed then. If that's how it reads, it should read December 1st.
And if I remember correctly, it was in Exhibit B for the financial portion of it. I forget where. I apologize for. I just remembered that detail that there was a change from December 15th to December 1st. And if it's still in the document, I just wanted to make sure that that would be corrected if that's still going to be the case for December 1st.
I'm pulling it up. unless somebody beats me to it.
I'm looking to, I thought there was a comment in there, December 15th or sooner.
Okay.
That's the way it read, Bruno, at least in my recollection, I'm looking through. But I'm
And
not,
if that's the case, that is absolutely appropriate.
Yeah.
it said or sooner.
Yes, it is on Exhibit A, Section 1, Contractor's Responsibilities. It says contractor will assume emergency shelter operations on December 15, 2023 or sooner.
Okay.
Thank you, Council.
Okay. All right, any more public comment or, go ahead, come on up.
Good morning, Supervisors. Brad Rasmussen, I'm Lakeport Police Chief, speaking on behalf of the City of Lakeport and the Lakeport Police Department. I just want to say that we're in support of this contract. We have many of our unhoused residents in Lakeport that use the shelter services. It has been critical over the past year to have that available. And the one gap that, we've seen was not being 24/7. That's going to be covered in this next one. So that's, I think, going to be a huge improvement, a huge benefit. We're very happy to see that. And also we want to thank the behavioral health, all the community partners, RCS, the supervisors, county admin staff that have been working very hard over the past year to keep a shelter service going. I know there's been challenges and it's been difficult, but it's been great seeing everybody's hard work to really make sure that we have this because it's very critical, not only to the unhoused community, but it has a huge impact on the community as a whole if we don't have these kind of services. So thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Supervisor Green.
Yeah, and just as long as we're drilling down on the contract, I don't think it's fatal, but on page 5, under bullet 2, County of Lake Responsibilities 2.1, it continues to use the word temporary emergency warming shelter. And of course, it's not going to be a warming shelter anymore. And because it's not fatal to the contract, I don't think we need to amend it. But I do want to signal to staff and everyone on the county side and everyone on the community side. Yeah, it's been a warming shelter for many years, but it ain't going to be from here on out. It's going to be an emergency shelter regardless of weather, regardless of warmth, cold, or anything like that. So that's the exciting part of this, is it's going to be a true 24-hour, 365-day operation that is not contingent on the weather outside to allow us to shelter these individuals.
Okay, go ahead. Do you have a comment?
I just remembered something that I wanted to speak to in response. So around sustainability, this is a almost 3-year contract to keep this shelter in operations through, I believe, July of 2026. The funding that Elise was speaking to, it's CalAIM, State of California, through Medi-Cal for short-term post-hospitalization housing, which can support emergency shelter beds for people who are coming out of not just hospitalization, even though it's called post-hospitalization. It can also support people coming out of jail or coming out of substance use rehab, coming out of a mental health treatment facility. So it's for folks that need somewhere soft to land to stabilize. They don't quite need the medical respite level. So we aren't going to be providing the medical respite where like we have a nurse on site and are providing that level of medical oversight, but we can provide a safe place for people to land. That funding will partially support the shelter in years 2 and 3. It will partially support the shelter if we're able to identify funding to keep it going past 2026. And the reason I just want to bring that to attention is that our experience doing emergency shelter is we have to braid a lot of multiple funding streams together to keep it going and keep it supported. And some of those are things like funding streams that we apply for our Ukiah shelter sometimes have nothing to do on the surface with emergency shelter. They have to do with case management services or with transportation services or with other things that kind of wrap into what we can provide through a shelter. There hasn't consistently been one funding stream that can completely support a shelter existing, unless it's maybe a very teeny tiny shelter that doesn't need a lot of staff and If we designed a shelter that could be more reliant on volunteers, maybe we could do one funding stream. But I just want to put that out there, that one of the tasks that we have in front of us over the next 2.5, 3 years is to identify some of those other funding streams. There are some competitive grants that we could apply for in coordination and collaboration with the community to bring in additional dollars to support the shelter after this contract expires. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page as we look to the future. It is, 2026. That seems like it's far away, but it sneaks up on us. So we'll be looking at those sorts of things of how we keep it going.
Well, thank you for your comments, and obviously, the long picture is always what everybody's thinking about, I think, in this room, and everyone doing the work, figuring out a way to make sure that this is happening, from now on. We've got to establish, we'll continue working together to do that. It's not going to be an easy thing, but I think everybody at this diocese and throughout the county agencies working on this, have a clear reality. But that's also something that we need to consider too, at the state level, at CSAC, at RCRC, that these are much needed things, much needed funding revenue sources directly to shelters in every county. I think should be a conversation. Supervisor Sabatier, while you're there, at least bring it up, have that conversation because the funding is number one. And there is a real focus in California from the governor's office that this needs to be done. We just need that pathway to be able to do it when we're able to step up and get it started on our own. So, I think everyone in this room understands it's going to be a collaboration as we move this thing forward.
Yeah, and just to dovetail on that real quickly, let's take those meetings early and often because co-locating services makes sense from the financial perspective. We also have land use perspective. So again, this is a temporary land use, even though we're getting ready to approve a 3-year contract here. So the more we make it sustainable by putting other services, we need to make sure we're not expanding a land use beyond the temporary emergency use that we're using out there. And I'm confident staff will work with CDD and anyone else to address any ongoing permitting and compliance issues with that. And that's I'm only putting in that because it's like you definitely have to get those other funding streams in there. But it just raised a little red flag to me that be cautious as we do that to make sure we're totally on point with the shelter operation with that.
Okay, any other public comment at this point? In the chambers or online? Okay, seeing none, any final comments from any board members? If not, we're ready for action.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Just purely as a procedural matter.
Yes.
Before action is taken on this item, and also as it applies to the previous item 7.2, since Supervisor Sabatier is appearing remotely under the provisions of the Brown Act, if a supervisor can just confirm whether there are any individuals 18 years or older present in the same room in his remote location.
I've had Supervisor Chuck Washington walk through the room that I'm in. I'm in an empty room. And I've also had Supervisor John Haschek from Mendocino County. And Chuck Washington is from Riverside County. But they are no longer in the room with me at this moment in time. But those are the only 2 individuals who have walked through the room that I'm in.
Okay, that is all. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
If there's nothing further, then I move to approve the agreement between the County of Lake County Behavioral Health Services Department, serving as the lead administrative entity for the Lake County Continuum of Care, and Redwood Community Services, Inc., in the amount of $2,417,489.64 for fiscal years 2023 through 2026, and authorize the board chair to sign.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. We will do a roll call vote.
Supervisor Sabatier,
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall,
Yes.
Supervisor Green,
Aye.
and Supervisor Simon.
Yes. All right, we've got a 24-hour shelter. Good job, everyone.
Thank you for having me, everybody. I'm logging out.